Stephen Lance, director of My Mistress. What is your movie about?
Well, my movie is about a romance between a 16-year-old boy and a middle-aged S&M mistress. And it's really about the healing that comes through unusual connections between people.
Is this meant to be an erotic film?
I would describe it as a tender romance, and I wouldn't describe it as an erotic film. I think that the sexuality is an allegory. It is a doorway into something more emotional between the two protagonists, something more of a transaction, an emotional transaction that brings to them, through their friendship, through their connection, a sort of healing that they both need at this particular time in their lives.
The film does involve some extreme forms of sexual practice. Did including that kind of material grind against your intentions of the film at all?
No, because to me, I was always looking at S&M as a therapeutic practice. I was always looking at the emotional side of S&M and what it means as a transaction between the people who are involved in it. And I always thought that was a very interesting way into an understanding between two people and a sort of transaction that involves healing. And now, if anyone knows anything about S&M, there is one side of it that you could say is the titillating, fashionable side of it that is just the veneer of it. But underneath that is this really interesting psychology. So for me, that was the psychology of that practice spoke directly to the connection and the healing that happened between Maggie and Charlie. So no, there was never anything that I thought, well, the sexuality will get in the way of the emotions of it. Right from the beginning, I've always said my film is not so much about S&M as it is about the need for connection. And now that might come through a perverse connection, but it isn't about S&M per se.
What was the genesis of this idea?
Well, the genesis of the idea comes from my own personal experience. It's an impressionistic look at my teenage years, particularly the death of my father and my relationship with my mother and my relationship with older women. So it comes from that, and it also comes from my my love of European cinema, particularly psychosexual, erotic cinema that involves complex psychosexual characters. My favorite films by Louis Buñuel and, Louis Malle, particularly Murmur of the Heart. And so that combination, the collision of those two things, my own personal experience and my desire to tell a particularly unusual film, that's how it's formed, I guess.
We're about to have 50 Shades of Grey unleashed upon us. We've just had Nymphomaniac. We've had the Australian film The Little Death. And there's the Polanski film Venus in Fur has just come out on DVD. All these films deal with fetishes and S&M and so on. Mate, is there something in the air? What's going on?
Well, I don't know. I've been working on this film for 7 years, so the 50 Shades of Grey phenomenon only really came out, I guess, a few years ago, and we were just at that point finalizing the script, so and looking for production finance. So, it was a real shock to me. I think it was a shock to everyone that was involved in our film, just what was happening in terms of the zeitgeist. But in some ways it didn't hurt us because suddenly it was a bit more mainstream and it was a bit more, dare I say, commercial. And so that made it some ways easier for us to get the film made. Although, the film isn't just a titillating skin flick. So and I don't read, because I don't know 50 Shades of Grey, I've never read the book, so I don't know whether 50 Shades is more than that or not, so...
Watching the film, and I'm thinking, this is so polite. It's so tasteful. It's not going far enough. This could have been Australia's Blue Velvet. You could have had every shock jock in the country screaming about this film. It could have been so wonderfully debauched. Why didn't you push it further?
Well, I was not interested in that. I was not interested in the provocation of it, of the subject matter. What I was interested in was the tender, emotional connection between two damaged souls that was about a sort of perverse healing, an unusual healing and connection. I wasn't interested in making something that we'd already seen before and that people expected to see in S&M. I wanted to do something with more irony, and I wanted to do something that was more unexpected because it wasn't what people thought they might see. So right from the very beginning, when I was developing and financing this film, I said to people, it's not an S&M film. It is a film about a tender connection between a teenage boy and a middle-aged S&M mistress. Now, people might expect that to be about whips and nipple tweaking and various other things that are a bit Blue Velvet or a bit nymphomaniac, but there are other directors doing that. That's not my bag, you know. I mean, I'm more interested in the subtle emotional connection that sits underneath the obvious.
Mm. And the other question I had was this, and this is more addressing the drama of the story. Why this attractive young boy doesn't have a girlfriend or just other friends, or even a school life to kind of register what's going on and to bounce off what's going on.
Yeah. Well, I wanted the film very clearly to start with a boy. This is a maturation story for the boy, so I wanted to start him off at a point in his life where he was surrounded by little kids and no friends, in real isolation. So it represented at an deep emotional level that this boy was isolated, not just from his parents, but from kids his own age. This boy was not normal, not having a normal experience for a 16-year-old boy. And here he was hanging out in the park like a little kid. And so through this experience, he meets a woman who's missing a little kid in her life. And, you know, without giving too much away, I don't think it will, there is a kid in her life that's been taken away from her. Now, Charlie himself is a little kid in the film. He starts off as a little kid emotionally. He transgresses. He goes on this journey where he is introduced to this adult world, and then he comes out the other end of it in a sort of new equilibrium. And the equilibrium itself is a sort of right age for him, and it's the only time in the film where we see him with kids his own age. So that was the idea, was to keep him in a vacuum away from kids his own age.
Okay, mate, just quickly, how did you get Emmanuelle Beart involved in this film? That's quite a get.
Well, we sent the script over to Emmanuel, and we waited to hear a couple of months, and in the meantime we were going about trying to cast the film and get it up and get it money for it, and eventually we did hear from her, and she really liked the script, and she asked to meet me, and so I flew to Paris, and I met with her, and we got along great. There was a couple of films that we really loved, which one of them was Thumbsucker, which was this really interesting coming-of-age film, and I said, I really wanted to do something like Thumbsucker, and I also said, I also loved Mama Roma by Pasolini, and she loved Mama Roma as well, so it was a communion, really, between us, and we just sort of like a communion of tastes, so we sort of knew what sort of film we wanted to make, and that was it. I guess there was a bit of charm involved. I don't know, a bit of luck.
Now, why did you choose this as your first feature film?
Well, it really chose me. I didn't choose it. It was just something that I couldn't escape, and it was an idea that just kept coming back to me, and because it's so deeply personal, I just needed to get it out of the way. I needed to make it, and I needed to put it out there in the world, and I wanted to do something deeply personal. I always find, like, my favorite filmmakers are those people who work from a very, very personal place, and they make very distinctive films, and so naturally that's what I was drawn to.
Once the film is released, what are you realistically expecting it to do? How is it going to play?
Oh, I don't know about that. I mean, it's. I hope that people go see it, and of course, and I hope that they take away from it the tender, emotional side, and the funny side, and the kind of strange coupling side of it that I'd intended in the film. But how it's received, I've really come to a place where it's just like, for me, I'm making it, I'm putting it out there. How it's received, I have no control over. And if it's any indication from how people have received Australian films, then of course I feel kind of like there's a sort of trepidation there on my part. But I think when people see it, and that's been my experience, when people see it, they really do get a great sense of warmth and connection, and they get the love from it, so I'm hoping that's what they get.
One of the issues with Australian film at the moment seems to be not so much the quality, but the fact that people don't know that they're there, so they don't go see them because they don't know that they're there. Is your film coming with any decent amount of marketing support? Is the trailer, for instance, which is a very, very enticing, very attractive trailer, is that going to be on TV?
No, it won't be on TV. We made a decision not to put it on TV. I mean, we already have an incredible groundswell of support on the net, Facebook and through social media, and I know that there's every session that we've had in at festivals, whether it's in Saint-Tropez or in Melbourne or in Busselton, they've all been sold out, and particularly women of between the ages of 30 and above, particularly women have really warmed and responded to the film in such an incredible way that a little film like this really, I don't think that putting an ad on television will necessarily reach the type of person that would go see this film. So there's very targeted ways in which this type of film is sold in to demographics, I guess you'd say. But I mean, for me, being a director, I don't know. I mean, it's my first time making a film, marketing a film, publicizing a film. So really, I don't know until it's out there whether the decisions that have been made to promote it are the right ones.
What kind of film industry are you growing into? What do you think of the industry at the moment?
I just think we're growing into the most exciting industry. I'm not looking at box office figures. That's for other people to look at, But I'm looking at the range of films that have come out this year, from Babadook to The Rover to Little Deaths to this incredible vast, Cut Snake, these incredible visions that are coming out. Now, whether they're doing well at the box office or not, I don't, I care, but for me as a creative person, I see a variety of creative visions that are coming to the screen, which are exciting to me. Now, the question of how we get audiences to these movies, well, that may be a question that's bigger than I can answer, but I'm excited that filmmakers are still putting out unique, original visions, and I hope they continue to.